Boom, bop, boom, ba, ba, doo.
I'm buried up to my neck in contradictionary flies. I'm very ape, I'm very nice.
Hello and welcome to Ear Seduction. I'm your host, Paul Schilling. Today I'm going to try something a little different, and you're going to have to bear with me because I'm just sort of shooting from the hip. I'm going to be talking today about myself. I think I'm going to call this series Very Ape, but I'm not even totally sure about that. I know I want to do something, though, where I talk to you personally. I talk to you about relationships. I talk to you about how I feel. And today I'm going to talk to you about the joys of lachrymology, or in other words, how useful it can be for you to cry. If you're anything like me, you really look for the way to solve your problem. So what's the most efficient solution to your day-to-day needs? So for instance, I need to work out. Working out is something that all people should do. It's healthy, it's good for you. But what's the best bang for your buck? What workout should you do to maximize your time? Well, the obvious answer to this is swimming. It's a cardiovascular workout. It's also a strength and resistance training workout. And you can swim for 20 minutes and get an equivalent workout to, I think, like 40 minutes of running and something like an hour and a half of biking. Swimming is easily and by far the best workout you can do. So what do? I swim. It's imperative that I join a gym that has a decent pool so that I can swim 3, 4, 5 days a week. And I swim for 20, 30, 40, sometimes an hour at a time. It's the best way for me to spend my time. It's the most efficient way for me to spend my time when I'm trying to work out. So why am I talking about crying? Well, if you're the kind of person who has a weight on you, if you feel all of the pain and suffering of the world, if you're the kind of person that actually expresses themselves, if you're plugged in, if you understand what we're up against as a species. So let me give you a couple of examples. So humanity has this insanely amazing ability to be able to experience the best of everything, right? We have the intelligence, we have the resources, we have everything we need to live amazing lives. And yet so few of us actually do. People suffer and die needlessly all the time. Every second, just if you watch the second hand on a clock, I know how antiquated that is, but if you just look at a clock that has a second hand, every time that second hand ticks, somebody's dying needlessly, suffering painfully from something: cancer, heart disease, starvation, diarrhea. A lot of this is completely avoidable. A lot of it needs science to advance to a certain level for us to conquer. A lot of it is just because somebody doesn't have the resources they need at the second that they need it. These are solvable problems, though. Don't get me wrong. We're just not doing it. The one that gets me often, and it's not the one that I worry about the most, but it gets me pretty often, is climate change. We have now blown way past the 1.5 degrees Celsius mark, and we are rapidly headed towards 2 degrees, and we're very likely to hit 3 or 4 degrees. Nothing's changing. Nobody's doing anything. Now, I know you read articles or whatever, and they say things like, oh, well, solar is getting really, robust as an energy source, and we're converting to wind, and we're doing this with that, and blah, blah, blah. But if you look at the graphs, if you look at the data, nothing's changing. It's not getting better. It's getting worse every year, every month. That weighs on me. That weighs on me heavily. That's why I do Paul's Passive House. That's why I change my living environments in a radical way, because I want to be somebody that did something. Even if it's painful, even if it costs me a whole bunch of money, even if it's something that I don't like doing, even if every night at the end of my night I think, Jesus Christ, I'm so far over my head with all these renovations and this efficiency standard, I don't know how I'm going to finish. I'm still doing it. I still do it because I have to do it. I have to be a person in the world that actually did something, not just somebody that says, I'm going to start a YouTube channel and talk about climate change, but I'm going to live in a house that's terribly inefficient, and I'm not going to do anything today or tomorrow or the next day to solve that. I'm not going to do anything to upgrade the level of efficiency of my house. Most people, most of the time, even the people on the internet, even the people you follow, don't do anything to solve this problem. Some people do, but very, very rarely. I don't know how many climate change scientists and science communicators I follow that understand we are at the worst possible situation right now as it pertains to the climate. And they're communicating, they're educating, but they're not doing anything. They're not getting more efficient doors and windows. They're not insulating their walls and their attic and their floor. They're not doing anything. They're not getting heat pumps. They're not advocating for any of this stuff. They're not doing any of the work. Well, I couldn't be one of those people. I had to say to myself, I've got to be that guy that actually did something. I not only have improved my home, but I've improved one of my rental properties. I want my tenants to have a better life. Not just me, but there's this weight. There's this weight of responsibility that's on me that I feel on a regular basis, and it's crushing because I'm only one person and nobody gives a shit about me. I don't have billions of dollars and teams of people that do whatever I tell them to do. I have all of the ideas, I have all of the solutions, which, I guess is debatable, but that's what I try to deliver to you on my show. But I don't have the resources. I can't do anything for society other than my own house. And even that I can't really do. I don't have enough resources to do a good job here. I'm doing the best I can. But that weight, that pressure, that understanding that life could be so much better for so many more people than it actually is, that causes me an immense amount of anxiety and stress on a regular basis. And all the physiological science that I'm aware of tells me that crying is an exquisite way, an extraordinary way to relieve stress. You can and you should cry. Now, I'm going to qualify that because, yes, you should cry. In fact, I just got done crying. I had a good cry tonight. That was one of the things I did. I cried for about 20 minutes. You should employ a strategy in your life to get you to cry. One of the hardest things for me in my solution, in actually implementing a solution of crying to relieve stress, was to get myself to cry. It wasn't something that was easy for me to do. I had to actually work at it to become a crier. I never used to cry, and now I cry. I mean, I cry sometimes a couple times a week in order to get all of this emotion, and some of it's sorrow, some of it's anxiety, some of it's pressure, some of it's stress, some of it's joy, some of it's happiness. There are different triggers that get me to cry, but there's a lot of emotion that's in me that wants to get out. And it's not always easy to get it out, but crying helps get it out. It's very efficient. Perhaps it's the most efficient way to get these emotions out. Well, let's talk about it then. Let's figure it out. So I did some research and I figured out that crying is an especially efficient way to get out any emotional strain or stress that you're feeling. So this could be a multitude of different emotions that you feel, but they build up inside of you into a welling of emotion that then springs forth from you. Now, sometimes that springs forth in anger. Sometimes it springs forth in suffering and pain. Sometimes it's love and admiration. Sometimes it's anxiety or other forms of stress. The important thing, though, is that you get it out, that you don't hold it in, that you don't explode on the people around you in frantic emotion, but that you control your emotions and that you release it in a controlled manner. And crying is that control. It's that way that you take time in your life to specifically express your feelings and emotions. Now, let's talk about how to get yourself to cry. The best way that I was able to get myself to cry, especially early on, was by watching movies. Now, one movie that made me cry when I was young was My Girl. Now, that's a stupid movie. It's a Macaulay Culkin movie, which doesn't make it automatically stupid, but it was a stupid movie. But I cried for the first time, really, when I watched that movie. And I didn't really understand what was happening because I was young and I wasn't actively trying to cry. But I watched that movie one night. It wasn't even the first time that I saw it, and I cried. But it made me realize that movies can trigger me to cry. And later in life, in my 30s, when I really put forth an effort to try and cry, to cry not on a schedule necessarily, but to purposefully take time away from my other activities to cry in order to get all these emotions out, I realized movies. I should watch movies. Now, one of the best ways to get me to cry is to watch a movie where someone succeeds. I love watching stories of people that go through a difficult time and then they succeed. They realize their potential. One of my favorite movies to cry to is the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I can almost cry at any of the movies. I love all three of the movies. They're not my favorite movies, but they're pretty close. I get annoyed with Peter Jackson's directing style and his inability for blocking, and he's way too interested in close-ups and zoom in and dollies and stuff. But the story itself is fantastic, and I love the fact that people in that movie reach their potential, and that gets me to cry. Other movies that get me to cry are a little bit more emotionally charged, like Steel Magnolias. And it's not because Shelby dies at the end of the movie that makes me cry. It's because her mother, I think her name's Malin, I might be mixing up the characters, but it's because her mother realizes her potential in that movie. She isn't just right. She's 100% right. You see, a lot of people don't understand the movie Steel Magnolias because they don't understand science and the butting of heads between science and religion, or between people that deny science and people that accept science. But that's what that movie's about. And Malin is the character in the movie that's the mother. What's her fucking name? Shelley Long or something? What is her name? Let me look it up real quick. It's Malin. It has to be Malin. Yeah, give me the cast, you fuck. Yeah, it's Malin. It's Sally Field. So Sally Field's a fantastic actress, and it's her character, Malin, that everything she predicts, everything that she foresees comes to light. It happens. And it happens because she is the one that accepts science. She's the one that understands that the only hope humanity has is through science. And her daughter, Shelby, who's played by Julia Roberts, and I'm actually not really a fan of Julia Roberts. She has like 3 good movies, and one of them Sleeping with the Enemy. The other one is Steel Magnolias, but she's really a weaker character. It's Shelby's rejection of hope and science that is her undermining and ultimately leads to her death. It's that butting of heads. It's that struggle that gets me to cry when I watch that movie. There are other movies. Interestingly, I cry at Karate Kid, the first one. That's a stupid one to cry at, but I like to cry at that movie. Sometimes I cry when sports figures that I really like retire, but that's not something I can use to manipulate myself to cry. It's not like I can put on press a button and on my TV, I can watch Joe Sakic retire. That's not a thing that happens. But sometimes stuff like that gets me to cry. That's a little more uncontrolled, though. But the point is initially watching movies was a way to make me cry. And specifically movies where people reached their potential, because that's so rare. It's so rare that people actually reach their full potential. Most people, most of the time, either become convinced that they don't have any potential or fail to recognize inspiration. They're either undereducated at the moment of inspiration, and so they can't even make sense of the brain activity that they're experiencing, and therefore their potential is never reached. Like, think of Einstein. Einstein had a flurry of brain activity, a flurry of inspiration that was only useful because of his background education in physics and mathematics. Think of the next time you go through a flurry of inspiration where you get a huge increase in brain activity. And think of how much better off you'd be if you were educated in the sciences, like let's say biology or genetics or whatever. And that flurry of activity was actually directed towards something useful. Most people, most of the time, are so undereducated that when it comes time for them to be inspired, there's nowhere to direct that energy. Every so often, and very rarely, a musician that I know will become inspired. And it's just lucky that they happen to have this inspiration and also have the tools at hand to translate that into, let's say, a song, a guitar riff or lyrics or both or whatever. Real magic seems to happen when a group of people come together, each one with their own education, and they all get inspired together. That's why beautiful music is made in groups often. But the tragedy is that most people don't have any outlet. They have no background, no education for this inspiration, and so it goes unrealized. That makes me sad. And when I watch a movie and I see someone realize their potential due to the preparation, due to the education, due to all that came before their moment of inspiration, and they finally reach that pinnacle, that makes me cry. That makes me feel good and hopeful. Now, I don't know what's going to make you cry. I've seen people cry when reading a book. Maybe books will help you cry. Sometimes I would watch Ultimate Fighter back when I watched the UFC, and sometimes I would see fighters finally reaching their goal, and they would cry, and that would make me cry because I recognize that they worked so hard to get to this point in their career, and fighting is really one of those careers that there's such high highs and such low lows, and most people in that career never reach any kind of high. They just get beat up, and then they fail. That's what mostly happens. But sometimes, very rarely, someone reaches that goal. That makes me cry. I remember the best time I ever cried, the time when I felt like I was really in tune with my emotions, but also expressing them at the same time, was when I was able to cry while playing the drums. I used to play drums 3 or 4 times a week for about an hour at a time. I really enjoyed it. It was something that perhaps one day I'll get back to, but as you get older, you have to start taking things out of your life. You can't spend your time doing things that you want to do as much as you start doing things you have to do. The older you get, the more you have to do just to maintain a high quality of life. And so you can't spend as much time in leisure. But in my 30s, I would often play the drums, like I said, 3-4 times a week, an hour at a time, or sometimes 2. And I got into a routine where I was able to cry while playing the drums. Now that was special. That really brought me out of sort of my emotional shell and allowed me not just to cry and emote physically, but to express it musically, which was incredible. Now, I'm so glad that I started crying before I started trying to cry while playing the drums. It sort of happened the first time by surprise, but then after that, I started doing it on purpose, and it became a thing. Now, it was short-lived because I actually couldn't do it as readily. It wasn't as easy for me to cry while playing the drums as it is, for instance, from watching a movie. But I encourage you to try to figure out a way to get yourself to cry. As I said before, it's probably the most efficient way to work through and to express your feelings. And efficiency is very important. If you want to live a long, happy life and you want to do things that you want to do, not things you have to do, being efficient is going to be incredibly important. Now, let's get into some of the caveats because there are a few. Crying in front of other people. In modern society in the United States, you are not allowed to cry. It really doesn't matter what kind of person you are, you're not supposed to cry. You could be a little kid, you could be a full-grown person. It really doesn't matter what kind of person you are. Crying is not acceptable. So I would encourage you to cry alone. I'll give you a couple reasons why that are more specific, but just in general, if you're going to purposefully cry, if you're going to spend time crying, you should do it alone. Now, let me give you some examples of times that I cried in front of people and it didn't work out. And I'll give you some examples of times I've cried in front of people and it did work out. But I'm going to give you the examples of when it didn't work out because I think personally, you should try to cry alone. You should have a space in your house, wherever you live, that's yours, that you can be private, that you can access the thing that helps you cry, access that thing and then cry, and not have to deal with anybody else. That should be your goal. Now, it's not that you shouldn't let people in. It's not that you shouldn't cry in front of other people, ever. There are socially acceptable times to cry, and the crying window should be open for everybody all the time in an ideal society, but we don't live in an ideal society. Most people, most of the time, are going to judge you negatively if you cry in front of them. And that includes the people that are closest to you. That includes people like your mom and your dad and your wife and your husband and your brother and your sister. There is no sanctuary for those that are crying. Let me give you some examples. Okay, so I had a roommate a couple years back, and I told him straight up, I said, look, I've been going through some stuff lately, and it has caused me to feel emotional. And so there are times, especially lately, where I cry. Now, sometimes I cry when I'm watching TV, or sometimes I cry when I'm watching a movie or whatever, but I get a little sappy. And it's just me emoting. It doesn't mean anything. There's no reason for you to be worried about it. But I primed him. I told him this is what might happen. And then it happened. I didn't try, like, I didn't mean for it to happen, but it happened. But it was like to myself. I wasn't like sobbing and weeping. I just kind of got a little verklempt, and I had a few tears, and I got a little choked up. My voice went a little weird for a second, but then I was fine. And he got so uncomfortable that he had to leave the room. He went to his room. He went to his bedroom. Now, that shouldn't be the case. Now, he wasn't a close friend of mine. He was just a roommate that I had at the time. But that rejection is real. Socially, you're not accepted with people, even people that you live with, when you cry. And whether or not that's ideal, like, it's one thing to say, oh, it's okay to cry, and for your significant other perhaps to say, oh, don't worry, baby, I still love you even if you cry. You can cry in front of me. I don't know how many times I've heard that. That's bullshit, okay? Most women, most of the time, are completely turned off by you crying. And that goes for most men if you're a woman. Most people, most of the time, are completely turned off by you, no matter who you are, if you're crying. And turned off isn't exactly the right word, but let's just talk about significant others for a second. So I had a significant other break up with me, and we got back together. That's very rare. I hardly ever do that. I don't recommend you ever do that. If for any reason you break up with your significant other, just stay broken up. Never get back together. There are good reasons why you broke up, and you should just stick to your guns. You should never be weak emotionally and take someone back. There's never a good reason to take someone back. Just go find someone new, someone that hasn't done something worth breaking up over. Anyway, I took that person back, and we had a moment. We were together. We were in bed. I was feeling vulnerable, and I expressed my emotions to her about the breakup and how I felt that it was a betrayal. I thought she was going to be that person that supported me through anything, and I didn't even really do anything, and she just broke up with me. She broke up with me on a whim. She thought maybe this other person might be interested in her, so she broke up with me to go see if that might happen. And I told her, I said, that was really the worst possible thing you could have done. It just totally deflated everything, and we have now a huge mountain to climb to get even back to where we were. We were on this wonderful plateau. We were in this wonderful space, but now that plateau has turned into a mountain. I used to be really comfortable with you. Then you did this. Now it's going to be an upward battle. And she never reconciled. She never was able to get up that hill. She was a piece of shit, to be honest. So of course she didn't get up that hill. And her breaking up with me for no reason was just sort of a premiere. It was a primer on what was to come later in the relationship. It was a dumb move for me to go back with her, and I shouldn't have done it. But it was even dumber of me and ill-advised for me to break down and cry while I was talking to her about this. I took this moment to try and make myself vulnerable to her, and she obviously, all of her body language, all of the way she was speaking, her tone, everything changed, and she just could not bear to be with me. Now, she didn't leave, and technically she couldn't leave because I was on top of her. I wasn't like pinning her or anything. I was laying there with her, and we were sort of entangled. So she couldn't really leave, but I could tell based on her body language, especially after I had cried for a while. I was crying, and I cried, and I cried, and I kind of fell into it. I kind of sank into this emotion, and it took a while for me to process it. It took a while for me to get through it. And while it hadn't taken too long for me, it had definitely taken too long for her. There was a moment at which I could actually feel her deflate, and she was just done. The emotion was too strong for her, and it was too much for her to bear, and she was over it. And while I can't say for sure that my status in her eyes was fully changed from that moment on, that I had basically become a different person to her, I had definitely been demoted in some sense after that emotional expression. And she, to be totally truthful, she was beneath me emotionally to begin with. She just didn't have the emotional range that I have, and she wasn't able to be a good partner to me because of this inability to feel emotions in the way that I do, in the range that I do. But crying in front of her changed a dynamic between us, and it was never repaired. It never was fixed again. And this is somebody who adamantly spoke to me as if crying was totally fine and a completely acceptable way to behave. And I just can't stress enough how false that is. That is so not true. every time somebody tells you that. There is no sense in which especially people that say, oh, it's okay, you can cry, I won't judge you. Here's the thing about somebody who witnesses somebody else crying. They don't know how they're going to react. They don't know how it's going to make them feel to see the person they care about, that they look up to, that they admire, whatever it is, whatever emotion that they feel for you. They don't know how it's going to change them to witness you crying. Because crying is such an expression of emotion and it's such a release, it affects people in ways that they don't realize, that they don't know that they're going to experience. So somebody can say, it's okay, you can cry in front of me, and they can mean it. And then you can cry in front of them and they can reject you, not because they're an asshole necessarily, but because they're just not emotionally mature enough to handle it. And they didn't know that until it was too late, essentially. So I encourage you to cry by yourself. Don't be that person. Don't test the person you're with. It's just not worth it. Now, if your mom dies or somebody in your family dies or one of your kids dies or something like that, cry. Cry together. It's an emotion you can share. But if you're just expressing your emotions that your significant other may or may not feel, or may not feel them to the level at which you're experiencing them at this moment, you're much, much better off crying alone. So now you're a crier. Let's say that you've figured out how to cry and that you've got a place that you can cry, and now you're a crier. You're somebody that cries. You cry, let's say, once a month, or maybe you cry more often, once a week, or maybe more often than that, maybe a couple of times a week, or maybe just whenever you feel like you want to or need to. Now, let's walk through some of this, because crying isn't always something you can control. And there have been points in my life, in my joys of lachrymology, in this process, where I have felt less in control of my crying, and then there have been times when I've felt more in control of my crying. Now, ultimately, crying is a release of control. Being a crier means that you're going to just let things out. You're not going to control them. You're not going to bury your emotions. You're not going to feel your anger only inside. You're going to let all of it out. That's the point. That's what makes it so efficient, is it works for so many different emotions. And after a good cry, you can feel almost completely wiped out. You can feel like a clean slate. You can start again fresh. That's what's so good about crying. So the idea is to relinquish control, but you don't want to just start crying, at work or in the car or, when you need to be doing something else. You don't want to do that. So how do you control it? How do you maintain some level of control? Because like I said, there were times when I felt like I had more control, and there were times like I felt like I had less control. Well, this is a fine tightrope that you're going to walk, and I encourage you to walk it. You might be embarrassed a few times. You might feel like you've lost control a few times that you didn't want to or whatever, and that's okay. It's better to be a crier and to get these emotions out efficiently and readily than it is to be worried that you're going to cry at an inopportune time. Now, generally speaking, I haven't had problems where I cry at an inopportune time. I think it's only happened to me like once or twice. And it's like, maybe it's in public, or maybe it's, in front of somebody that I'm not prepared to be in front of. And maybe it's at a time when I wasn't thinking I was going to cry. So maybe I was watching something on TV or whatever. And then all of a sudden, I was like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed with emotion. Now, here's how it happens a lot of the time. So I'll be doing something or watching something or whatever, and I'll get an overwhelming sense of emotion. It'll well up in me to the point where I feel like I'm going to burst. And then I just won't. I recognize that I'm going through an emotional moment. I take deep breaths and compose myself, and then I just don't. I take note and recognize also that I need to cry, just not at the Avalanche game during the national anthem, right? Just not right now. Let that emotion well up. Let it settle in you. Let it pass through you, and then just don't. Now, conversely, go back to wherever, your house or your room or wherever you have a space. Get back in touch with that emotion, either through a movie or a book or whatever it is that gets you to cry, watching a Karate Kid, whatever it is, right? And have that emotion. Have like 5 or 6 movies on hand that you can watch that'll help you cry. maybe a YouTube channel or a specific personality or a specific moment in time. Maybe you watch, I don't know, the announcement that Kennedy was shot or whatever. I don't know what it is, but you have a moment that you can reliably cry on and then recognize, okay, I need to go through that moment. I need to do that thing. I need to go through that process that I go through to make myself cry. I'm at a goddamn Avalanche game and the Rockets' red flare and bombs bursted in air and I'm getting all emotional. I'm welling up and I'm not going to cry now. I'm going to breathe through it and I'm just going to, okay, let's look at some statistics. How many points per game does Nathan MacKinnon have and so on? But I'm going to take note when I get home or tomorrow or some other time in the near future, I'm going to watch Steel Magnolias or I'm going to watch another movie that makes me cry. I don't want to say which ones make me cry because it's embarrassing. It's like, okay, really? That's what you do, Paul? You watch that movie and then you cry? I'll just stick with Lord of the Rings. That's one that, there's so much going on in that movie. I dare you to find the point in the movie when I start crying. It's not even always one point. It's just all over. But anyway, recognize that you're experiencing a welling of emotion. If it's at an inopportune time, then breathe through it, let it pass. Excuse yourself if you have to. Go to the space where you're able to cry without judgment, without anybody seeing you. Engage in the activity that gets you to cry and then have that cry. Now, crying. As you're crying, let's talk about that and then let's wrap this up. So you're crying. How much should you cry? How loud should you cry? Personally, I like to try and let the emotion happen however it happens. I don't need to be in control of my crying, although I find it very difficult to just openly bawl and wail. It's not like that's an easy thing to do. I often breathe through the tears. My tears often come in spurts. I'll get, that didn't sound right, but I'll get a lot of tears for a little while and then they'll dry up a little bit and then they'll come back and then they'll dry up a little bit and then they'll come back. And I may or may not actually make noise with my mouth. I might just cry and breathe. Now, on occasion, if I'm feeling especially overwhelmed, I might actually moan and weep. I might actually openly cry, making noises with my mouth. Now, that doesn't happen very often. It shouldn't necessarily be a goal. The goal is just to release this emotion, whatever that means, however that happens. It's to release that emotion through tears and crying. It's not necessarily to convulse and wail, but that does happen from time to time. I recently went through something very difficult. I lost a friend to, the QAnon cult and Alex Jones, and that was a very difficult thing for me to go through. I felt a lot of anxiety and stress because what was once a very happy-go-lucky, productive friendship with somebody that I cared about very deeply became essentially a stressful struggle and a fight every time I saw this person. Because here's the thing about people that believe in like Alex Jones or whatever, they believe in, conspiracy theories. It's not enough that they believe in it. You have to believe it too. And so every time I saw him, every time I spoke to him, he had something for me to believe. Something about the Freemasons or Nikola Tesla or lizard people or flat earth or whatever. There was something that I had to now believe. And he would take offense. He would get really upset that I didn't believe him. And this put incredible stress on our relationship, on our friendship. And on multiple occasions, I asked him, how can we get through this? I don't believe the things you believe, and you seem to be obsessed with making me believe these things. And I just can't because you can't demonstrate that any of this is true. How do we get through this? And he had nothing. He had no solution, and he didn't care to make a solution. It was either his way or the highway. And when you've been in a friendship for 25 years with somebody and you feel like they're your brother and they tell you, look, you're either going to believe in flat earth or you're rejecting me as a friend, that is stressful. That causes stress and suffering and pain. And that's what I was experiencing on a regular basis with this person for years and years and years. So yes, there were times when I was processing all of those emotions. When I was trying to get over, for instance, the fact that we weren't friends anymore, or the fact that he was quite literally losing his mind, that he should probably go see a doctor, that it was getting so bad that he needed therapy, that he needed, maybe medication. that was incredibly stressful for me. And yeah, there were times when I would actually weep and sob and wail. I mean, imagine somebody that you think that you feel like they're your brother, like they're, the closest family member that you have, and they're completely lost and essentially riddled with what feels like dementia and some strange, I shouldn't say dementia because honestly, dementia it wipes the slate clean. There is no blame, but he had essentially lost his mind. You feel like he is completely lost and he's blaming you for not believing in literal lizard people. That's a really tough spot to be in, especially we saw each other multiple times a month, especially time after time after time after time. Now are you ready to believe me, he would say? No, I'm sorry. I haven't seen any reason to believe that lizard people from another dimension are controlling our minds. And he would get upset, like not wanting to physically fight me, but not terribly far off. Yelling, screaming, upset, name calling, all of it. Fighting. Not like boxing, but, fighting. Arguments. And as an empathetic person, I see his stress in all of this. I see that he's struggling with these thoughts and feelings and emotions. I see that he looks at me and I'm looking at him like, oh my God, you're a fucking lunatic. And he doesn't like the way that feels. And so I see his mind, not only that he's losing his mind, but also that he's losing a friend. On his side of the equation, he's also losing out. He's also feeling stress. I don't like that either. I don't want my friends to be stressed. I want him to be happy and healthy. So yeah, there are times in your life when you will wail out loud, when you'll bawl, you'll convulse, and you should definitely do that alone. I hate to say it. I'm a progressive. I'm like an ultra progressive. So I feel like you could do that in front of me and I would be okay with it. But I cannot speak for other people. And the vast majority of people that I've seen witness somebody crying hate it. They absolutely hate it. They hate every second of it. They want it to stop before it even gets started. Even the thought of somebody crying causes them they feel disdain and they don't want to have anything to do with it. You're not even their friend anymore, not during that outburst. So while you're crying, I would just say to let it happen. Let as much of it happen as possible. Let go if you feel like you're holding back. Hold back a little if you feel like you're letting go. Work with it a little. Tease it out. Let it flow from you, but also restrict it. Learn how to play with your crying so that you're able to emote to a level that makes you comfortable. And at some point, just let go completely and see what happens. You're alone. Nobody's going to judge you. Nobody's going to care. And your tears will dry. Your nose will stop running at some point, and you'll feel better. You'll feel better no matter what the outcome of your crying. But give yourself a chance to cry. Don't well up your feelings. Don't bury your emotions, especially anger, hate, resentment, envy, jealousy. Don't let that fester. Get it out. But also passion, love, commitment, empathy, compassion. Let those out too. Don't well those up. You might feel immense hatred towards someone, and instead of acting on it, or instead of letting that hatred consume you, you should cry it out. But in the same way, you might feel immense compassion towards someone or a group of people. And instead of letting that well up, maybe you don't have an outlet for either of these emotions, hate or compassion. And you don't have a positive way to express that. You don't have a way to express your hate to someone, and maybe you wouldn't even if you could. And you don't have a way to express your compassion towards someone or a group of people. Maybe you don't have access to them. Maybe you're just not well connected, or you don't have enough money, or you don't have whatever it is you need to actually express the emotion you're feeling. And that emotion might be incredibly positive. It might be something like love, like I said, compassion or empathy or hope for humanity. I cry just as often about how hopeful I am regarding humanity and how we can be better as a people as I do when I realize just how fucked we are and how miserable everybody is. Both emotions I feel equally as strongly, and both emotions I have almost no outlet for. I've always said this. Humanity is the one thing that I both hate and love equally. And I almost have no outlet for either of those extremes. I certainly don't have an outlet for my hate. I don't want to hate anybody. And even if I do hate somebody, I don't want to express that to them. Now, my love, there is a wildly passionate love for humanity that I feel on a regular basis, and I have almost no outlet for that either. There is no subject of my love. Nobody cares. So in this conundrum, whether I'm crying because I feel badly, that's sort of elementary to say it like that, but whether I'm crying because I'm experiencing hate and frustration and rage, or whether I'm crying because I feel hope and compassion and love, it's an expression that I'm just going to let flow through me because I just don't have anybody or any group of people to give it to. There's just no recipient for those wild extremes. And I hope you don't have that same problem. I mean, I hope you're not giving your hate and rage to people. Don't do that. But I hope you are finding outlets for your passion and your compassion and your love. I hope you have somebody that you can actually express how you feel and your love, and they accept it and they reciprocate it. Because see, that's my problem. I've tried to give my love and my compassion to people, and they just don't give a shit. They don't reciprocate. They don't even know how to respond most of the time. And so crying is a way for me to have those emotions and to move them through, to work through them. And I can do that alone. I can do that without anybody. And if it's pain and frustration and hate, then nobody has to suffer through that. And if it's love and passion and compassion, then nobody has to be the recipient of that and then make me feel like I just wasted my time because they don't even care. Now, again, I hope you don't have all these problems. But if you have some of these problems, crying in a meaningful way on purpose and with the purpose of working through your emotions can be and will be an incredibly efficient way for you to process these feelings, whatever they might be. And if you're like me, you have a wide variety of feelings and emotions, some of which you can express verbally. I can tell you that I'm anxious, or I can tell you that I'm cautious, or that I feel that I'm in love. And then other emotions are too complicated. I don't know how to express what they are. I couldn't tell you if you showed me a piece of paper that had all these different faces on it of expression, and one was joy and one was anger and one was stress or whatever. I don't know that I could point at one of those faces or even two or three of those faces and adequately express how I feel. But I can work through all of it equally as efficiently and quickly by crying. And you can too. Thank you for listening. This has been Ear Seduction.